Good morning. Welcome to Joyful Medicine with Dr. Jenn. So today we're going to talk about the dairy, the new guidelines, and my perspective, my take, and some steps that you can take to move along. So one of the most common questions I get about the new guidelines is, "What about this dairy?" And if you're feeling confused, you are not alone. Um, Sorry, I'm going to silence my phone. Sorry. So today I'm going to walk you through what the guidelines actually say, what dairy actually does in the body, and why I don't routinely recommend it for my patients, what plant based alternatives are actually good and can be helpful, and how we can support our bodies more effectively. So, welcome to Friday Morning Live with Dr. Jenn. I do these every Friday morning. I am a physician who's certified in lifestyle medicine, pediatrician and lifestyle medicine doctor, and I help people, children and families, transform their metabolic health using joyful medicine. So this is where evidence-based lifestyle medicine meets joy, community, and everyday living. So welcome to Friday Morning Live. So, what do the new guidelines say? They actually include dairy as a really important part of a healthy diet. And they recommend full fat dairy. Dairy is included because it is a source of protein and fat and calcium and other micronutrients. They still recommend, though, that saturated fat stays below 10%, which we know is important. Saturated fat is implicated in many chronic diseases and can have a lot of negative effect on our cholesterol, our weight, and other things. So, dairy is actively included as a significant part of the diet, which, if you say less than 10% and but also include full fat dairy, it gets a little confusing there. So what I actually recommend often, because I see many patients, children that have abdominal pain or asthma or eczema, and they're struggling with inflammatory conditions as well as just digestive issues, and the same with adults with inflammatory conditions. I routinely actually recommend against dairy, and that has been what I've been recommending for years. I will explain why. So, a lot of times, as I mentioned, a lot of times in urgent care, even I see a lot of pediatric patients with abdominal complaints, whether it's constipation or bloating or just abdominal pain, common complaint in children. And believe it or not, majority of the population globally is lactose intolerant. So lactose intolerance is common. And so when you consume lactose, when you can't digest that sugar, that lactose, you get bloating, you get discomfort, you get pain. And this is pretty common. The other common thing I see in pediatric patients is constipation. And many times it's related to consumption of dairy. Dairy can exacerbate it. And when you combine that with low fiber intake, you have a lot of problems. A lot of adults have lactose intolerance. So same thing with adults. Also, I coach a lot of adults on metabolic disease, on inflammatory conditions, and these things can be made worse with dairy. And sometimes you remove dairy, you can see a significant improvement. I've seen this many times. Patients will come back to me. Urgent care, I see patients on one-off times, but I often recommend this if a patient comes with, abdominal pain or eczema or acne, even to eliminate dairy. And I have so many patients come back to me, not come back to me to see me, but come back again for another visit, and they have eliminated dairy and their symptoms have improved. So this is really important. Dairy contributes to a lot of symptoms, and dairy is, it's in everything. If you're getting a packaged good, most likely it has some type of dairy in it, and this is a problem, that we see. And recognizing, not everybody has an allergy to dairy, but it's how our body processes it that it can result in inflammation and make inflammatory conditions worse. The other thing is that, this full fat dairy recommendation is concerning because, with this recommendation to keep our saturated fat below 10% with good reason, when you consume full fat dairy, again, it comes without fiber. And so that risk of elevating our cholesterol is even higher. So it's just something to keep in mind. So the other big thing is that most of us don't necessarily drink milk, although some people do. A lot of the dairy in the American diet comes from cheese. So this is what I want to talk about. Cheese and full fat dairy, cheese particularly, is really calorie dense food. It's really high in saturated fat. And the thing is, when we're trying to support our metabolic health, when we're trying to decrease inflammation, these foods are not really helpful, and they lack fiber, which is a key in helping us modulate inflammation in our body through our gut health, through our microbiome. And so when we add the dairy, combine it with a low fiber diet, we set ourselves up for increased inflammation and many other digestive issues along the way. So cheese, let's talk about this. I had this conversation with my patient the other day. We were talking about improving her. She had an inflammatory arthritis, and we were talking about different ways to improve her diet to support this. And we talked about adding more plant-rich foods, so fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, which I always talk about. I'll talk to all my patients about. But I also talked about, in this case, what to limit. I often focus on what to add because I feel like that's the most important thing. Most of the time, we're not getting enough fruits and vegetables, and that's the problem. But in certain cases, if we're dealing with a specific illness, I hone in on different things that we can do to actually reverse the illness. And one of the things with inflammatory conditions, one of the first things I talk about is dairy because we consume so much of it and it really can have negative effects. So I mentioned this to her and she said, "Oh, but what about the cheese?" And that is a big thing. So I wanted to talk about cheese a little bit. So cheese is a problem because it really can be addictive, right? It has that process connection, that the fat and the salt together, which makes it us want more and more of it. In addition, there's this um, this idea of oh, like I can't think of what the compound is, but it makes it just very comforting and it's convenient. It's really hyper palatable, so it makes us want more. And we tend to overconsume it because again, it doesn't have that fiber along with it. So when you're eating cheese, you can eat a lot of it without getting that full filling. It kind of it blunts that satiety response, and so it makes it easy to consume a lot. And that is just because that's how it is. That combination together can be a problem. So what do we do about cheese? So first about dairy. So there are so many alternatives to dairy. I should talk about this. Okay, so dairy, what they mention is the full fat, the protein, and the micronutrients and calcium. So there are many other sources of calcium and other micronutrients that you can get from plant sources. So you can get calcium from calcium fortified, you know, milk, which milk has got vitamin D fortified milk. You can get calcium from green leafy vegetables. You can get calcium from nuts and seeds, particularly sesame seeds and tahini. You can get protein from many other sources, right? Beans and legumes, nuts and seeds. Really, protein is in all living things. If you saw my videos from last week, I talked a little bit about that. And the micronutrients. So I will I want to emphasize that when you consume a plant-based diet, a variety of plant foods, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, you're getting all of the micronutrients. When you consume all of these micronutrients and a variety of different plant foods together, that diversity, it enhances the absorption of these micronutrients. So actually, when you eat a plant-rich diet, you are getting more, not less. And so I just want to emphasize that. So there are plant-based milks. There's soy milk and almond milk and oat milk and coconut milk and the list cashew milk and macadamia, so many different varieties. And what I did when we went plant-based as a family, my kids were young, they were 7 and 9. I needed to figure out what was a milk alternative we were going to use, what we're going to use for our cereal or whatever we were using milk with. And so we did a taste test and we tried them all out. And I will say that some are it depends on what you like, right? And so we settled in on, I think it was rice milk at the time, which probably, I don't know, rice milk has fallen out of favor. It's not very that nutritious, not as nutritious, but it wasn't our main source of nutrition, right? So that's the other key, right? Our main source of nutrition was all the other plant-rich foods that we were getting. It was just an added, which is a big thing. You should get we talk about milk as a nutrient dense food, but it's a calorie rich food. The nutrient density is not that great. You are getting a lot of calories from it. And so that is often a problem when you're talking about toddlers encouraging to eat other foods. Sometimes they fill up on milk because it is so calorie dense and they don't, they have that in addition and not have the other foods. And that's really an important point is we don't want to be filling up on liquids. We should be filling up on those nutrient rich foods. So milks variety of different milks. I recommend trying them and seeing what you like. I personally recommend soy milk often because soy milk has a similar, it has a really nutrient dense pattern, and it has other phytonutrients in there that are beneficial for the body, especially when we talk about hormonal health, um, than cheese. So, what do we do with the cheese problem? So, cheese, yes, I admit, is a hard thing to let go of. That was one of the things that was hard for us to let go of when we first went plant based. The plant based alternatives were not great. And I don't often recommend just switching from regular cheese to plant based cheese. I actually recommend just going cold turkey because it is hard to break that pattern. And you're never going to find, that exact, taste, that exact combination. I will say that the plant based alternatives are better than they were in the past. But I think the key here is replacing it with more nutrient dense foods, playing with different textures and flavors. So, say for example, if you're using, cheese in a salad, that's one of the things as a plant based, as a vegan person going out to eat. It's one of the things that's one of my pet peeves. You don't if you want to alternative. So the cheese, when you think about the salad, is adding sometimes some creaminess, sometimes that texture, sometimes that salt. So you could do it with other things. So I like avocado as a replacement if you're looking for creaminess. If you're making a sandwich and you want that cheese, avocado is a great replacement because it's giving you that creaminess again. Adding some nuts and seeds for different texture. So playing with different things so that you can I always think that when you go plant-based, it like wakes up your taste buds to different things. And so not to say that you have to go completely plant-based, but maybe adding more plant-based foods is what I always often encourage. And so one of the things to do is by adding that variety of different textures and flavors is that it is a good way to break that cheese habit. Now, I will say one of the things I did when I moved plant-based was, eliminating the processed cheese, like the cheese slices and shredded cheese and things like that, and saving it for, like, if I was having cheese and crackers, say, or having it as, like, a special, and then that is, removing that ubiquitous, right, where cheese is everywhere, instead saving it for special occasions, so that breaks that pattern and that kind of addiction that we have to it, and looking at some of the cheese alternatives are better. And so some of the things that I do like, I like Miyoko's cheese. I like there's tree line cheese. And the way that I choose the plant-based cheeses, I look at the ingredients list. And again, you want to look for ingredients as always, which I'll probably do a live on this coming up next, is looking at the ingredients list to make sure that the ingredients are things that you recognize. So I like the cashew-based cheeses. Some have coconut milk as the creaminess, add the creaminess factor. Look for ones that are actually made like cheese. So I will see the other thing that a lot of the cheeses that we use in the the processed cheeses that are used are processed, right? Cheese can be some of the most processed foods that we eat, which again goes against the recommendations of getting away from ultra processed foods. So when you're looking at the cheeses, the ones that I choose are the ones that are the least processed. Look at ones that are actually fermented, like the actual process of making cheese should be. Um, and again, looking at different flavors and textures to add to your foods that break the pattern of the cheese. So I know I got a little off track there, but so flavor first, nutritional yeast is a great if you're using sprinkled or you're looking for grated cheese on pasta and things like that. I actually just eliminated the grated cheese altogether, but there's nutritional yeast, which gives you that savory, cheesy kind of flavor. I like to make my own like cheesy sauces with cashew based and adding nutritional yeast and other flavors in to do it. Tahini, miso, hummus, um, pesto, olives, roasted vegetables. All of these things can add depth and flavor to your dishes without the added cheese. Um, and the plant-based dairy alternatives, I said again, looking at the ingredients list and then use them as a transition. But again, sometimes I think when you're talking about cheese, you're better off just eliminating it and then just adding these other things for flavor to wake up your taste buds to different things. So I think that I always talk about joyful medicine. So what you add as opposed to what you exclude, and thinking about joy and flavor and texture that is the most important thing I think in life, is that making sure that you're living it to the fullest. So making sure that you're getting joy and flavor out of your foods. And so hopefully this was some idea to give you some good ideas to alternatives to dairy, but also different ways to wake up your meals and add different plant-based things to them in general. I am doing a plant-based challenge this month in my private community. I'm sharing tips all month, recipes, education about nutrition, how to include more nutrient dense foods in your life and daily. And really, it's all about what you add as opposed to what you take away. Most Americans don't consume enough fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds. So, big focusing on that as opposed to eliminating anything is, I think, the most important thing, what I'm trying to share this month. So, if you want to join that, you can join my community for free for 7 days. The link will be below. And join me next week. Maybe I'll talk about label reading next week. I think that's a good thing because one of the things the goals with the new guidelines was moving away from ultra processed foods, but we all need some packaged foods to help get us through this busy life that we live, and convenience is important. So being able to navigate that, healthfully, while also supporting our health is important as well. So join me next Friday. I'm always live here at 9 a.m. And if you have any questions or topics that you'd like to see, please feel free to comment on this thread or send me a message. Okay, have a great day. Thanks for watching.